Good hello everyone, this is Jay or some may know me as Kwani. Anyway, I was able to do the Unmasking the Horror tours for HHN 31. I was able to do both the 6 and the 3 house tours. So I got to see all the houses with their lights on and get to see all the Easter eggs and stuff like that. So I decided to grab all the photos and talk about them here. Also, this video will have blood and gore. Also, it will have some spoilers for the houses. So if you're not a fan of that, probably skip this video. Oh, one more thing before we get started. I did take this tour about a couple weeks ago, so there might be some things that I might forget, or might be some things that I might have gotten mixed up or stuff like that. So bear with me. So the first house I did on my tour was Hell Block Horror. Basically, the story behind it is that they have a prison and they had like interdimensional beings and stuff like that. So they have like creatures from previous Halloween Horror Nights. Like a good amount of the creatures you see in this house are from the Case Files Unearthed Legendary Truth house from last year's HHN. So the story is basically the creatures have all gotten loose, so you are in the middle of basically a battle between the guards and the creatures. The guards basically want to go and get to the core and blow up and self-destruct the entire prison before all the creatures get loose. So in this photo here, the creature's severed head next to this guard, I believe it's from one of the Case Files Unearthed house from last year, and I'm not quite sure which creature it was. I can't remember. My tour guide told me, but I totally forgot. In this photo, you can see that you are in Block 31. And you'll see a lot of homages to 31 since this is HHN 31 and also Halloween takes place on the 31st. So you see a lot of 31s throughout a good amount of the houses, if not maybe all of them. So this warning sign is in multiple languages, and you will find out as you go through the house that each house that this house is pretty much in sections. So you'll see a zombie section, an alien section. You will see like a vampire section and so on. So this is basically showing you the different languages you're going to see throughout the entire prison. And also here is a rat. You can only see it really well during the daytime, and at night it's pretty hard to see. So I thought I'd just point this out. And here is a dead rat by the broken pipes over there. So this next room with all the chain linked fences, this is basically a welcome room area for any new inmates that are coming into the prison. Also in the same room on your left, on the floor, you can find a familiar mask. This is the severed head of a mouth breather, which are from the 2019 house Depths of Fear. So the next room is the guard barracks, and one of my favorite little small Easter eggs is to the right in this room. You can see a mugshot of a cat, a very naughty cat apparently. So this sign in the guard barracks shows the key phrases that the guards should know when interacting with each of the creatures inside of this prison. And this photo shows the blueprints of the entire prison, and supposedly on the bottom right, that is the blueprints of the entire house. So this guy in the electric chair is supposedly named Sparky, or at least the mannequin's name is Sparky. So over here we have a sign showing the different voltages for each of the creatures. So NTEs are aliens. So parasites, they are the vampires. The infected are zombies, and fiends are like the giant creatures. I can't remember what the Homo bestias are. So every HHN house, they like to do a consistent Easter egg. So last year's consistent Easter egg was the butterflies, and this year it is this specific looking spider. And here it is at Hellblock Horror. So this photo basically shows the lighting, the speakers, and it shows that the fact that we are inside of a soundstage. Oh, and one thing I never noticed is that there's a bat right here in this corner. So many veterans of HHN will recognize this prop. This is the Blood Eagle prop, and back in like Viking times, they would, as a form of torture, they would basically tie up their victim and fillet them just piece by piece while they were still alive. And it was kind of like a game to them to see how much they can cut and tear open until their victim dies. So this room with the giant cage is home to like a giant Yeti-like creature, which I believe it was in the legendary Truth House, the Case Files house last year. This Yeti victim, severed head looking thing, kind of looks like a nightingale, but my tour guide told me that it was one of the creatures from the scary Horror in the Heartland house last year. So next up, we go into the black hallways where the vampires reside. So if you look at these physical props, I believe these were on the right side. These mannequins were from the Hive, which was a vampire house, and they're more like the Nosferatu style vampire. I believe the Hive house was from 2017, so HHN 17. And here is another Hive mannequin. So inside of the black hallway where the vampires reside, you can see how it is covered. And it's not something that most HHN houses have because it's really expensive because they have to put a sprinkler system on it. So you see that black cap right there, that's actually a sprinkler system. So if there's any fire, water will come out. And it's pretty expensive to do that. So that's why they don't really do it very often. And now we come into the last room, big room at least. This room has a couple characters that look like they have head crabs on them from Half-Life. And that red button is the core apparently. So you see a security guard up there, push the core, and then boom, the whole place blows up. And right here is an actor activated trigger. So this trigger, a scare actor will step on it and the lights and sounds will happen. Because if the scare actors yell the whole event, they would basically probably lose their voice. So they just push the pedal and then that's it. So right here you can see some more lighting and speakers. And here is the final hallway, which has lots of fog and lots of strobe lights. So the second house of the tour is arguably one of the most beautiful houses, and that would be Dead Man's Pier, Winter's Wake. So the story behind this house is a little different from what they released on their podcast. In the podcast, there is a character named Sophia, and she's a violinist. And the violinist you see in this house is not the same violinist as Sophia. So the story behind this is basically the violinist you see in this house is the captain's widow. And I guess she's using her violin to call sailors and fishermen from the dead, all to be reunited with her captain. At least that's what I got from it. But this house does take place in present day. You will see some hints that it is like these boxes. So you may recognize this sign from Dead Man's Wharf, which is the scare zone back in 2016 or HHN 26. It basically tells the story behind the scare zone, and I guess it kind of translates to this house. I've also never noticed this crane over here. And now we are going into the captain's widow. An interesting thing is that during the tour, they will not let you take photos of the right part of this bar because the taps that they have are actual beer taps. So I guess they did not dress them up or anything like that. So they're actually beer companies on their taps. And in the back of the bar, you can see a violin that might be the captain's widow's violin. And to the right of the bar, on the wall, you can see a board with a ton of Easter eggs. So on the top left, you can see the mouth breather, which is again the scare actor costume for the creatures in the Depths of Fear house. Right below that, you can see a sign for a lost locket, and some of the text are lyrics from the song Brandy, You're a Fine Girl. And below the Brandy reference, you can see what looks like Captain Jake's boat tours, which is a reference to Jaws, the ride. And on the top right, you can see a submarine lab. I believe it's a reference to a movie, but I don't remember which movie it was. And to the middle right, you can see that blue piece of paper that says Quint's Marine Salvage, and that is a reference to Jaws. Again, here's some more detail from the bar. So on this shelf on the left side, you can see that whale paperweight. That was on Janine's desk back in HHN 29 in the Ghostbusters house. And on the chair, you can see a jacket, and that is Will Byers' jacket from Stranger Things. So I guess he's paid a visit to the bar. So in the portrait to the right of the fish, that is a painting of James Westthorne, who is the kid from the Tooth Fairy house last year. He was the kid that would not give his teeth to the Tooth Fairy, and the Tooth Fairy all attacked his family because of it. And moving right along, we have Thunder, who is a Pomeranian. I see this prop used almost every year, so I'm glad Thunder is back. So you can see some of the jackets over here. They're that hint that this takes place in present day. While when I first went through this house, I thought it was back in like the 1800s or early 1900s or something like that. There's a little boat for sale sign over here. And you see this body is wearing a modern life jacket. And now we are in the boathouse. You can see on the bottom floor how it is painted blue. I believe during team member preview they actually had water here, but it kept leaking, so they just said screw it and drained it and painted it blue. I never noticed some of the seagulls and the poop on the ceiling over here in this room. And the back of this little dinghy has Orca written on it, which is a reference to the Jaws ride. And this is the area where you see the captain's widow, Siren, playing the violin. Very cool. I really like this scene. You can feel the ocean mist during this scene. Here's some more shots. And what's really cool about this house is that you can actually see some of the areas that you're going to walk through in the beginning of the house. So looking back, you could actually see the lighthouse, which is in the main facade, the front of the house. So moving on, the third house on the tour is the Universal Monsters Legends Collide house. Now for this house, it is an intellectual property house, or an IP house. So unfortunately, there were only a few rooms that we can take photos in. So for the backstory for this house, the Wolfman is currently trying to find a cure for his moon sickness, or the reason why he turns into a wolf during a full moon. So during his studies, a mysterious letter slips under his door or something like that, and he finds out that in Egypt there is an amulet that can cure him. So he basically goes all in, goes to Egypt, try to find it, and little does he know that the mysterious benefactor that sent him that letter was Dracula. And Dracula is basically kind of following in Wolfman's footsteps. So once the Wolfman gets to Egypt, it is a full moon, and once the transformation happens, basically chaos starts. So the amulet, it turns out, is being protected by a mummy, and the mummy is named Charis or Caris. I'm not sure how the pronunciation of his name is, but he is protecting the amulet, and it's an amulet of Ra. So in the house, you'll see the mummy, and he is wearing an amulet that's glowing, so it kind of looks like Iron Man. So during the house, as you're going through, the Wolfman just turned because of there's a full moon right when he gets there. So it is basically a three-way battle. So the Wolfman is trying to get the amulet, Dracula is trying to get the amulet, and the mummy is trying to protect that amulet. So in this first room, you can see what looks like an Egyptian dig site, and on the top right, you can see the silhouette of the Wolfman transforming because there is a full moon. So it doesn't look very good now because the work lights are on, but that circle in the back over there is the moon. It actually looks way better with actual show lighting on. I love all the details they have around the campsite. And there's a little Anubis statue and a stretcher. And there's some random spider over here on this box. It's not the actual spider that they hide in every house because the coloring is a little different. But it's kind of weird how they put one here. You have to be kind of tall to see it. So next room, you actually see a mummy over here, and almost like an Egyptian priest is like resurrecting the mummy. And to the left, there are some either herbs or sage or something like that. And I remember my tour guide talking about it. I think it's something that they actually use during the mummification process or something like that. On this side, there's two Anubis statues, and there should be a third one, but the third one's not always there. It's usually a scare actor, but most of the times that I've gone through this house throughout the event, there hasn't been a scare actor there. And one cool thing about this effect for this mummy is that once the Egyptian priest does his incantation or whatever, the mummy, his left hand will start raising. So the feat you see here is a reused prop that they used in the Universal Monsters house back in 2019, or HHN 29. So somewhere in the middle of this house, there is a Mummy the Ride reference. There is a cup of coffee uh, on a table, and near that cup of coffee, there is a book. And on the bottom right of one of the pages, it says, "The curse, it's real," which I absolutely love. Uh, Unfortunately, this prop is right across from a scare, so most of the time people are too busy looking at that scare than looking at that uh, cup of coffee on the table. But unfortunately, I could not get a photo of that cup of coffee because it was in a room where photos were not allowed. And for this house, they have one of three endings, and it's per night. So each night you'll have a different victor. So you might see Dracula holding the Wolfman's head. You might see the mummy holding the Wolfman's head, or you might see um, the Wolfman holding the Dracula's head. And they have at the end they have two static props that they slide the doors to each night, so you can see one of the dead bodies. So they have two dead bodies in there. One is the mummy's dead body, and it looks like it has a hole in its chest, so it looks like someone ripped out the amulet from his chest. And the other one is a Dracula dead body that has a stake in its heart. and it kind of looks like it's kind of ashed out, or it has some ash around it, so it looks like it kind of burned him. So one thing my tour guide mentioned was that for all the houses, they have an A cast and a B cast. So A cast will be on for 45 minutes, and then B cast will come in while the A cast takes a 45-minute break, and then they kind of switch. So for this house, instead of calling themselves A cast, B cast, they call themselves Team Edward and Team Jacob from Twilight. So for the fourth house of the tour, we head over to Bugs Eaten Alive. Now, the backstory for this house is that it takes place during the 1950s World's Fair, or somewhere in the 1950s, uh, during BuzzCon. And the story is a company is debuting a new product called Exterminator. So this is basically a chemical, like AC slash heater machine that pumps in a chemical that will kill bugs as well. And it has a fresh pine scent. So as you're going through the house, something goes horribly wrong, and the bugs get a higher dose of the exterminator chemical. And they start mutating, getting bigger, and killing all the staff, the people in the World's Fair. So in the first room, you see Barbara, who is the showgirl model, kind of demonstrating the exterminator product. So on the wall, you can see what looks like spiders on the wallpaper. And that's when something goes wrong, and then Barbara starts to freak out a little bit. And from this room, you are supposed to go right, as you can see here where it says the tour starts here this way, but you actually go left. And then you start going into like a backstage area, quote unquote. So this house features a lot of SIF, which is an acronym called Stuff in Face. At least that is what Universal likes to name it. And then you start going into a showroom where you see models of like the perfect 1950s family enjoying their day, but bugs are attacking. So these are mannequins, they're not like humans, obviously. So you're kind of seeing like, oh, this is what your life would be with Exterminator. And you get a poor doggy with the bugs all over it. And right here you can see the spider that they hide in every house with the coloring, the red and the white on it. So in this fireplace, this little guy kind of looks like a face hugger. So he might be a prop that was reused in the Alien vs. Predator house back in 2014 or HHN 24. So you see a ton of bugs here. Some cockroaches, some grubs. So on the SIF in this room, you can see that they glued cockroaches to it, like up above. So most people won't notice it unless they're looking up, because most of the time when you're moving SIF out of your face, you're just kind of looking straight to remove it out of your face. So in this room, there are a lot of grubs around the wall and everything. And one of my favorite characters is in here. Um, its name is Jumbo Grub. And one of my favorite things to do is when you see it and you start chanting Jumbo Grub over and over again, depending on how it feels, it'll start dancing, which is one of the best things ever. And it is absolutely adorable seeing a jumbo-sized grub dance. And over here you can see some of the grubs in the walls. And this is the spider room. You can see they have like people cocooned and the spiders are eating them. There's a giant spider over here. I never noticed this, but right behind the shelves over here, you can see some spider legs sprouting out. And one of my favorite things about the ending of this house is that you can see Barbara, who was that showgirl model in the beginning. She comes out with some basically battle damage from the bugs, and she has an axe, and she's just like, "Yeah, let's do this," start attacking back. And like every 1950s cheesy movie, this house ends with the army coming in and shooting all the bugs. So at the end, you can see a army general kind of shouting out its troops, saying like, fire, and then telling you to get out of the house. But unfortunately, these areas are non-photo areas. So the next house on the tour is Descendants of Destruction.
So the backstory behind this house is that an apocalyptic event occurred that had poisoned the air and killed most people, driving the survivors underground. So we are heading into a New York City subway system where most people have gone underground. And as you're going through the house, technology devolves as well as people. So first for technology, you start seeing solar powered things. And then as you're going through the house, it goes from solar powered to battery operated to bioluminescence. And just as the technology devolves, the humans do as well. So they start going in as survivors, trying to basically kick you out of the turf, to cannibals, to animals. So one cool thing about this is outside this car, you can look inside and see there's a lot of detail in here, like this little plush monkey. And unfortunately, most people won't even notice this is in the car because the walkway is a little far away, so you gotta have to like walk on the gravel, and I'm not sure if the staff will let you do that. So the first room is you're going into the subway system, and as you're going through, you kind of see like the turnstiles and everything. And one cool thing about this is that on the left wall, as you're walking in, you can see a subway car, and this subway car actually stretches back to another room further back into the house. So now you're walking into a subway car, and you can see some of the stuff that people have left behind and brought in. And some of the Easter eggs are in the posters or advertisements up above. So this is an advertisement for Fungus, which is Among Us again, a producer Frank Kincaid and Lonnie. And this is a reference to the old attraction Disaster, where Fungus, It's Among Us, is one of the fake movies that Frank Kincaid, the director Frank Kincaid, uh, directed, which I love that Easter egg. Right here, there is a ad for basically a public service where it's working with you to create a cleaner universe. So you can see the public service name on the bottom left, and it is an acronym for EPIC. And above that is universe, so it's an Epic Universe reference. So in this advertisement, they are advertising Shop and Go, which is a reference within a reference. So the Shop and Go was a convenience store in the Seeds of Extinction house back in 2018, or HHN 28. So the convenience store inside of that house sold the Lightning Gulp, which is a giant frozen drink called the Lightning Gulp. And the Lightning Gulp is a reference to Lightning Gulch, which is the location in Ghost Town, which is a house in 2016, or HHN 26, which was a great house, by the way. So there's some more details here about, you see the state of New York map that shows where you are. And right here is the Manhattan History Museum. If you zoom in, you can see that one of the exhibits is Imhotep, priest of Egypt, which is a reference to Mummy or the Mummy Ride. And right here, you can see a bat that has a barbed wire around it, and that is Lucille. And this bat was used by Negan in one of the Walking Dead houses they have done in previous years. So this sticker here looks like it says Tom and Dan. I believe that's a podcast reference. One of the Universal Creative guys liked that podcast and they just kind of plastered that podcast to the window. So this is a really cool effect. You could see they use mirrors to make the train look longer than it actually is up top. So it kind of looks like a train is coming from the top, crashing down over the train. And this train on the bottom level extends to that very first room. Looks like someone lost a shoe here. So we skipped the cannibal section because those were all areas we could not take photos of. So now we're heading into the caves where you can see the survivors have devolved into the animals. So they're basically like mushroom men, and everything is like bioluminescence and everything. This door over here is a reused prop from the depths of your house. You see some mining equipment and everything here. And there's a random bat. So the sixth and final house of my six house tour was The Horrors of Blumhouse. So this house is kind of weird because it is two houses in one. So the first Blumhouse property they do is the movie Freaky, and the second house property they do is Black Phone. So the Freaky portion of the house is physically located in the Fast and the Furious queue, while the Blumhouse portion is in a tent between the facade and the queue building for Fast and Furious. So what's interesting is during the tour, Fast and Furious was open. So when we were in the freaky portion of the house, which is in the Fast and Furious queue, we could hear the Fast and Furious music playing. It's actually pretty funny. So the plots, I'm gonna give you the plots for Freaky, so it will spoil the movie if you haven't seen it and you really care. But the story behind Freaky is basically Freaky Friday, but instead of swapping with the mom, the girl swaps with a serial killer. So the serial killer is named the Butcher, or at least that's what everyone calls him. The girl's named Millie, and she's not very popular. And I think she's the mascot, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've seen this movie. So first, the Butcher comes in, and he finds a magic knife. And what he does is he tries to kill Millie, who is the main character, but doesn't achieve the kill. So that causes them to switch bodies. So then the killer is in the girl's body and basically goes around and kills big people in her school. And she actually becomes cooler now that she is, the killer and more confident. And the killer is Millie, and she's just trying to reverse everything. So the first room you go into is a collector's room. So there's like a bunch of artifacts in here. You'll see on the wall a mask is missing, and that's the mask that the butcher is known to be wearing. And on the bottom here, you'll see that magical dagger. You can see there is a wire attached to the dagger, so it does glow. This victim over here inside the antiques room, where the butcher gets the dagger and his mask. One of those victims looks like Jesse Eisenberg for some reason. The next room we could take photos in is inside Millie's school, and there's a scene in the shop class where they have to build a doghouse, and the teacher, who is kind of a dick, he says that Millie has to present today, but Millie claims that her presentation date is later in the week. So if you zoom in on this board to the right, you can see that Millie's presentation date is on a Friday, while the day that he's claiming is earlier than that. So her doghouse isn't ready yet. And then Millie kills the shop class teacher, who's kind of a dick, this way. Very gruesome, very cool scene. So that's all the photos we could take inside this house. Eventually they swap their bodies and back in the end, spoiler alert. So the next house would be the Black Phone portion. And the story behind this is basically a kid gets kidnapped by the grabber, played by Ethan Hawke, and he is basically thrown into the grabber's basement. And there's a black phone there that's unplugged, but for some reason it rings. And when he picks it up, he finds that the grabber's previous victims are talking to him and basically giving him tips on how to survive and get out. So it's a very interesting, very thrilling movie. Not too scary, a couple jump scares. So in the first hallway, there's a bunch of missing kids posters. And fun fact, all the missing kid posters are all like the Universal Creatives uh, people who are, as they were younger, or maybe they're kids, I don't remember. But there's a character named Bruce Yamada who is supposed to be Asian in the movie, but I guess they didn't have an Asian kid. So as you look at the Bruce Yamada poster, you'll see that the kid portraying Bruce is clearly white. As you're going through the house, you'll see some of the black balloons that the grabber uses to mask his kidnapping of the kids. And when the work lights are on, it's more obvious that those balloons are actually black playground balls. So this house, it's a lot of going through the same room over and over again because a lot of the movie does take place inside the basement where he's keeping the main character. So one thing I never noticed during my initial runs through the house is that you can see the eggs on the ground with the toy spaceship that the main character uses to cut the grabber's arms as he is being kidnapped. You can see the black phone. and you can see the grate where the main character tries to escape. So the next scene here is the grabber sitting on this chair. He actually leaves the door to the basement unlocked and kind of open. So the kid will come out and he would catch them and beat them with his belt. So one cool thing I like about this is that you could see that his eyes are closed in the mask over here. So it's not something you would really notice during normal show lighting conditions. And for some reason in his house he has this photograph of these horses pulling some kind of carriage. So this stove over here, they nickname it the Tampa stove because it is an antique stove that they found in Tampa. So my tour guide was really excited that this was called the Tampa stove for some reason. And you could see some of the tent structure and the speakers if you just look up. So the seventh house that we're heading into and the first house of the three house tour is the Halloween house. So this house follows the 1978 Halloween, and they did do a 1978 Halloween house back in 2014, but this year's house follows the events of the movie more accurately. So in this room over here, you could see a photograph on the nightstand, and it is a photograph of a lady. And I believe that lady was the producer of the Halloween movie or something like that. She was involved in the making of the original 1978 Halloween movie. See some of the show lighting they have for the scares. In this car over here next to Smith's Grove Sanitarium. And this is the famous Halloween house. In the top right, you could see Michael Myers up there. Here is Strode Realty, because the main character is Laurie Strode. So if you're looking at the house facade, to the right up against the wall, you could see right behind the trash, you can see the spider Easter egg that they hide in all the houses. For some reason, there's a framed photo of Jack and Jill falling down the hill. Here is, I believe this is Michael choking some chick. It's been a while since I've seen this movie, so I don't remember much of the specifics that happen. Here's Judith Myers. I believe that's Michael Myers' mom. I don't remember. There is a stairway to Mike up here. More stairway to Mike. So to the right of this television, there is a TV guide, and supposedly this TV guide was one that they found that was of the same year that the movie came out, back in 1978. So it's a 1978 TV guide that came out. See some candy from the trick-or-treaters. So in the same room, you'll see the knitting supplies over here, and you notice that there's one knitting needle missing. And this character who plays Lori, she has the other knitting needle, trying to defend herself from Michael Myers. You can see some more of the detail in the random books that they have. Look like they might be from some library. And unfortunately, the rest of the house we could not take photos of. There was a really cool room that has a bunch of mirrors and fake Michael Myers, with some that are real, and a strobe light effect. That's really cool. So the next house on our tour is Spirits of the Coven. So the story behind this house is that there's a bunch of witches who run a speakeasy in the 1920s. So as you're going in, you'll see this warehouse, and it's a meat packing facility, but it's actually a hidden speakeasy. They ask for the password, and the password, I believe, is Witch's Brew. Then you go into the back of a hat shop facade, and then you reach the speakeasy. So for this speakeasy, you'll see the more attractive looking witches try to lure in the men because they're easier prey. And as you're going further into the house, you start seeing the more elderly looking witches. So this is the bar area. And some of the witches do have men working for them, but if you look closely, you'll see that their mouths are sewn shut, or at least they have makeup that make it look like they're sewn shut. So inside the bar area, you can see how it's all decorated for Halloween. Some more details here. So you see these symbols throughout the house, and they are runes from the witches. So the witch's ultimate goal is to capture men and drain their blood to make their witch's brew. So it's a very girl power house. So this painting's kind of hard to see during the work lights, but during show lighting, this painting is actually a hidden safe. So it is a little ajar. Some random flapper witch over here. You can see this guy's not having a good day. And here's a better look at the runes that are above the bar area. This guy's also not having a good day. Well, he is and he isn't because there's a flapper witch having her way with him. So this is one of the witch's servants playing this piano over here. And the next room is the gambling room. You can see more of those runes up above. And these tarot cards, they're actually real tarot cards, so they're not made up or anything like that. And apparently you could buy these. One of my friends actually bought this exact set that looks just like this, which is I think it's pretty funny. So you could buy some HHN tarot cards. So because 31 is a common theme throughout the event, you could see someone's going big on 31. And right here, for the roulette, they're using an eyeball, and it landed on 31. And this room is supposed to be a elevator, kind of hard to tell. But as you're going in, you can hear the cable snap and you fall, and then it bursts you with air during normal conditions to signify that the elevator has dropped. But not many people notice it. You can see some peacocks over here. These were actually used in the Puppet Theater House last year during HHN 30. And it's kind of a reference to Peacock or NBC. So here is a some of the men that they lured in and captured on ice. See more witches symbols with the stars, and there's some random guy's head in this bird cage. So this is a really fancy bathtub that no one would ever notice the feet of this bathtub are this fancy unless they take the tour or they like really are weird and looking down to see how fancy these bathtub legs are. And here is a witch's spell in this book over here. You can pause or read it if you want. Now you're going into the caves where you see more of the brewing operations. And this cart is super effective for my first couple run throughs of this house. So this cart is an animatronic that comes down, and the audio it makes as it's coming down and crashing in is really loud and everything. So as you can see on the bottom on the tracks, you can see some stoppers. So as it comes down, it makes a loud noise as it hits those stoppers on the track. You can see some more of these runes. And as you go into the last room, which unfortunately is a room that we can't take photos of, there's a really cool projection mapping effect in there. And you can see the Queen Witch, who is blind but has an eye on her forehead. So it's kind of like the third eye. So she's all seeing, so she can see what all the other witches are doing and everything. And you can see some of the men victims around her that all have their mouths sewn shut. And they all have tarot cards above them. And I believe each of the tarot cards have like swords on them, which I believe usually means like a bad omen or something like that. So on our way to the last house of this tour, we were able to cut through the facade of Dead Man's Pier. So we got some photos of the facade over here. So I was able to see it again. So it was pretty nice to see this again with the lights on. And it's kind of a advertisement for the six house tour where you actually get to go through the entire house. So the final house of the tour and ninth house for us is Fiesta de Chupacabras. So in the podcast, there is a lady, I believe her name was Rosalita, and she's a little girl during the podcast, and their village has a festival called the Festival of the Blood, or the Blood Festival, or something like that. And it was tradition for all of the villagers to have masks. And her family was the mask maker family, so they would make masks for everyone in the village. So every time during the event, her family would tell her to stay at home during the peak times of the event. So one day she decided to sneak out to see what was going on, and she saw some tourists there. And one of the tourists was tied up and seems like they got stabbed. So what Rosalita did was she let them go, and as the tourists left, all of the villagers came back and they were like, "Hey, where'd the tourists go?" And we found out that the reason why they do the Festival of Blood is to satisfy the cravings of the chupacabras. So this village would put on a celebration that would attract tourists to come in, and the tourists would all basically become sacrifices for the chupacabras. And there are multiple chupacabras in this house. And each chupacabra has a white eye, but they all look different. So each one has different scar locations and stuff like that. And they have different names as well. So the chupacabra names, in order of when you see them, are Coco, Tiana, Dusty Bun, Dante, Rocco, and Skittles. So after the villagers realized that the tourist was gone, Rosalita's dad basically gave himself up to be a sacrifice. And as he basically got torn limb from limb, Rosalita realized what had to be done. And she continued the tradition of making masks for all of the villagers in town. So the first character you see is actually Rosalita later in life, all grown up, making the masks. So all the villagers are wearing masks except for one. When you actually go inside one of the villagers' apartments, he actually comes out and he's kind of mad that you're there. So here is the very first room, and it's a great view. I love the environment here. All of the dialogue is all in Spanish in this house, and supposedly every room you're in, there is a hint of the chupacabra. You either hear chupacabras or you see them throughout every room in the house. So this facade is pretty cool because you actually see the different layers going on, and you can see the different areas you're gonna actually walk through in this house. So here are some of the masks that Rosalita is making. So supposedly every mask portrays what each villager's profession is. You can see some more details in this walkway area. So this is one of the tourists here. So all the tourists you see will not be wearing masks. So only the villagers are the ones that are wearing masks. So that's how the villagers can tell who is a villager and who is a tourist. So supposedly you're going into the mayor's compound in this section of the house. And you can see some chupacabra symbols. So they actually use, I believe, blood to paint the mark of the chupacabras on everyone's house. And these wind chimes over here spell blood in Spanish. So they're the blood wind chimes. So right here you can see a live chicken. And then a little bit further down in the house, you can see a dead chicken, or what used to be a chicken. So right here is kind of like the processing area where they process the tourists that they have captured for the chupacabra. And this is a really cool effect where you see this tourist's body gets dragged off really quickly. Some more detail in the area. And I love this open square area. It's very hectic, a lot going on. You see a DirecTV satellite on top over there. Looks like someone was playing a game of dominoes. So now we're going into the butcher area. So this is where they process the meat from the tourists that they've captured, and they drain the blood to mark the mark of the chupacabras on their house. And I love this pig with a cleaver in its head on the wall. So this is the only chupacabra we can take photos of during the tour, and I believe this one's name is Dante. And you can see how one of its eyes is white, and all of the chupacabra's eyes are white. And as you go into to the last section of the house, you'll see a chupacabra on your left and right. So it kind of signifies that you didn't make it, and the chupacabras have killed you. So that's all the photos I have of the houses, and I hope you all enjoyed the in-depth view and backstories and Easter eggs of the 9 houses of HHN 31. Now I hope you guys have a further appreciation of these houses. So anyway, this is Kwani or Jay Kwana signing off.